You don't wanna never count yourself out, make it a great one. Just be sure to leave out the doubt, time to wake up.
Hi, I'm Tash, author and illustrator of Exit Without Leaving. And my goal in this video is to help give you the go-to laws and principles I've used over the years and coached executives from all over. Now, these laws and principles are the wise words written on paper and studied about from so many people before us, but I know that they'll bring clarity to your leadership. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the mentalist Ox Perlman said this: the most interesting person in the room is the most interested person in the room. And I really like that quote because in order to apply these types of principles and laws well in your own leadership, you have to be curious. So let's get started. The first one is the Pareto principle, or maybe you've heard it as the 80-20 rule. And essentially what it states is that 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. So if I was to illustrate this for you, just think of all the results in your business, in your leadership. And I want you to think about the 20% that provide the most results. I want you to think about the 20% of the leaders in your business. I want you to think about the 20% of clients or customers that you love doing business with. And I want you to think about systems. When you think about the 20% of the software, the technology, the processes that you have within your company that actually help you streamline things in your business. So essentially what I'm saying is find the 20%, double down, and ditch the distractions. The next one I want to talk to you about is the Parkinson's law. Now I want you to think about this as work expands to fill the time available. So if you were to look at this as an illustration, if you give yourself 2 hours to complete a task, you will take, you guessed it, 2 hours to get it done. Oftentimes we need constraints. So I remember working with an executive a while ago that kept saying, I can't hire that person. I don't have time to invest in that person. I just can't do it. We looked at his week and we said in 168 hours in a week, where's your time going? And what I noticed was there were some big chunks of time that were really going to certain things that I questioned, such as it took 4 hours to do his company financials every single week. And I said, can you do that in 2 hours versus 4 hours? And of course, I double dog dared him. And what do you know? The next week, he did it in 3 hours, not 4 hours. And the week after that, he did it in 2 hours. Then I double dog dared him if he could figure out how to make this into a training program, into a process so that he can hand that off so that he gets that time back. There was someone in the company that literally took the finances over within 6 months. Now, within 6 months, they were able to do that. Why? Because we set constraints for him. So the idea behind Parkinson's law is that you give yourself constraints so that you can get things done maybe faster or maybe get them to a point where you can hand them off. The third law that I'd like to talk about is the law of diminishing returns. You could look at it as simple as this, a bell curve. At some point, there is a time where the effort that you put into it will start to diminish. You won't ever get it back. I think of a pretty funny example with this one. Just yesterday, I was having some technical issues with computer and all this setup, and I literally got to a point where I was like, if I spend any more time on this, I will literally just start pulling out my hair, and I knew that I wasn't gonna get anything out of it. Now what happened? I shut everything down, I went and focused on something else, I slept on it, come back the next day, and I fixed it in 10 minutes. So here's the point. There is a time to where when you put in this much effort, you're gonna see that it will start to diminish, and the effort you put in does not equal more output, it actually equals less output. Okay, number 4, the Peter principle. Now I want you to think about the Peter principle as this. People get promoted until they're incompetent. Essentially, a really good foreman starts to become maybe a general site foreman. He does really good. And then over time, he starts to become maybe a general manager or maybe an ops manager. And at some point, he stops being able to do his job well. Why is that? Because we actually promote people until they become incompetent. So the point of this is don't always promote on what they do. Elevate with structure, elevate with support, and fit. Look into the future and decide if you think they have the skills today that will help you get to where you're going tomorrow. All right, so the next one is Goodhart's law. And I want you to think of it like this. When data or a metric becomes the target, it stops being a good metric. So if you think about it in the sense of you have this target, which maybe it's your revenue, right? And over here, you got your leadership, and maybe you think about it as net profit. You have all these different metrics and data that you could track. But when you start focusing on just one of those, you start to lose sight of the other ones. You start to not pay attention to those things. And what happens is that your focus on revenue growth starts to deplete your attention on the actual profit. Really what it ends up doing is it's distractions. So focus on real value drivers, not those vanity KPIs or data metrics. Okay, so the sixth one is Gaul's law. This states that all complex systems evolved from simple systems that once worked. So I want you to think of it kind of like this. You have these simple systems in your business, steps 1, 2, 3, and everyone understands it. But as you grow and as you continue to add more people to your business and more software and technology and processes, what once was simple starts to be more complex. And what once worked starts to become less clear on what is working today versus yesterday. And these complexities really stall your growth. And so if you ever heard it like this, you simplify everything before scaling. So simplify your financials, your operations, your sales, because complexity will start to kill the growth that you once dreamed of. So the idea is not complexity, but simplicity. The seventh principle that I want to go over is the principle of least effort. And if you've ever heard of the phrase that the deer will take the path of least resistance, so will people. People will naturally take the easiest route. So if you think of it as if you have these SOPs or processes, if you will, that have 100 steps, when people see that it has these huge complexities in it, they will start to do what takes the least amount of effort. Now, I know this sounds very similar to Gaul's law, but I think they pair real nicely together, because essentially what it's saying is that although you made these simple systems and they became complex systems, now people will start to not follow them because they're going to take the easiest route, not the hardest route. So keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. I think that's funny. All right, so the last one that we're gonna go over is the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Now, mostly I've used this in the hiring process, but it certainly applies for promotions or when you're thinking about your own leadership or other people's leadership. And simply it states that people will overestimate their abilities in a particular domain. Okay, so I want you to think of it like this. Okay, when you think about in the hiring process, we all love to see the resume. People want to show how great they are on their resumes. But here's the thing that I think is interesting. When you start to hear people say, I'm an expert in, or I'm really, really good at this, or over the years, I've perfected this, I want you to get extremely curious and pay attention, because Dunning-Kruger Effect simply states that people will start to overestimate their ability to get something done or even in their own abilities. So what you need to do is pay attention to those words and do like trial periods. Question them, give them aptitude tests. Start to figure out and pay attention, be really curious about if they're really the right person for the job or if they're the right person for the promotion. That is all I have as far as the laws and principles that I use. Those 8 key things are so important in your own leadership. These laws really aren't optional. They're the cheat code to success in your own leadership. If you want more resources, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, but also you can connect with us at connect@consultlivingwater.com.
Meet Bob. Bob buys Exit Without Leaving. And that's it. No action, no change. Just another dusty book in the graveyard of good intentions. Bob's business didn't exit. It just left. Now meet Jason. Same book, different story. Instead of using it as a paperweight, he tries the ideas. Wild concept, right? He tailors the principles, teaches his team, and suddenly, Boom. Growth. Freedom. A business that finally works. Without him working 24/7. Exit without leaving. Not just another business book, the one you actually use. Don't be Bob. Pre-order now. Build healthy leaders. Don't be Bob.